It wasn't long ago that I reviewed the Timex Weekender Chronograph, a watch that I believe is the best chronograph for under $75. It was after that review that I received multiple comments from people on various watches that could potentially compete with the Weekender. One of them was a watch that I had never heard of before, and this is a review of it. It's an $18 Torbollo Chronograph. The reason that many people have never heard of Torbollo is that it's a brand sold directly from China on Aliexpress. Now let me back up a second for those that aren't familiar with Aliexpress. Aliexpress is based out of China, and in many ways it's kind of a cross between Amazon and eBay. It's similar to Amazon, where small businesses can list products and sell directly to consumers worldwide. But it's more like eBay, where Aliexpress doesn't actually sell anything directly, just acts as a middleman for various other sellers. And also like eBay, the same product can be sold by multiple different sellers. There's a little bit more to it than that, like how Aliexpress is actually connected to the Alibaba Group, which was founded by Jack Ma, who is probably the 20th richest person in the world. But the short version is this: while it may not be a familiar name inside the United States, outside of the United States, it's huge. Now back to the watch. I'm not sure if it actually has a real name or an actual model number. The ones that are listed on the website I think are lost in translation, shall we say. But if you do search for Torbollo Chronograph, you will eventually find it. When you look at the Torbollo, it has an obvious inspiration for its design. Basically, the Torbollo Chronograph is an homage, shall we say, to the Timex Weekender Chronograph. Now, before we get into the details, I'll just say that I was hesitant to buy this. I've never bought anything on Aliexpress before, not to mention that I questioned how good a watch could actually be for $18. But two things suckered me in. The first, since I was new to Aliexpress, I got a $4 coupon by using the mobile app. Secondly, I noticed the black version of this watch, which has a sandwich dial, and one of the pictures showed the lume shot of that sandwich dial. And I am a sucker for a dial with good lume. So for $14 with shipping, I figured why not. So let's get to the details. It's a black-coated stainless steel case with matching black sandwich dial. You have both 12 and 24 Arabic numerals around the inner and outer chapter ring, with the addition of minute markers as well on the outer chapter ring. The inner 12-hour markers are part of the sandwich dial, and thus are cut out to expose the lume dial below. Along the same line, the 3 subdials are also on the lower lume dial. One thing to note on this chronograph is that the center dial's second hands is actually for the time, and the 6 o'clock subdial is for the chronograph, with the 9 o'clock subdial being for minutes elapsed, up to 60 minutes. The dial at the 3 o'clock is not part of the chronograph, but it is instead for 24 hours, which means there is no dial to measure partial seconds. Although for most people, a 24-hour subdial will probably be more useful. Another thing to point out, when using and resetting the chronograph, the minute hand is directly connected to the second hand, so the second hand subdial has to spin around as many times as possible in order to reset the minute subdial. This is not necessarily a bad thing. I've seen other chronographs that do this as well. I just thought it was worth mentioning. All of the hands are black, with a very small amount of lume applied to the hour and minute hands. There's also a very small date window at the 4:30 position. Another thing to mention is that the hands do not exactly line up perfectly. But I won't exactly fault it for that. I've had watches that cost much more with the same problem. Now the watch is of course topped off with a crystal, but I'm not entirely certain what type of crystal. Many of the listings simply list it as being glass. I emailed asking for some clarification from one of the sellers, of which they simply replied mineral crystal. So I have to assume it is mineral crystal. On the right side, you have the regular chronograph buttons. The crown is a decent size, and the chrono pushers are reminiscent of an old stopwatch. Now, as long as we're talking about the crown, I'm going to bring up my first complaint. When setting the time itself, the movement is a little loose. And what I mean by that is that it doesn't take much rotation of the crown in order to wildly turn the hands, which can make setting the time a little difficult, as you need to make sure that you push the crown straight back in after you set the time. Any small amount of rotation as you push it back in will throw off the time. Along the same lines, I found it a little difficult to pull the crown out to the first position in order to change the date. It usually pops all the way out to the second position to change the time. It took a little bit of back and forth in order to get it in that first position. And as for the strap, it's okay. It's an all-black nylon NATO strap. It's nothing special, but it will do the job. In many ways, it's reminiscent of a nylon strap that you would find on a cheap backpack. I did throw some other straps on this watch as well, just to see what it would look like with some nicer straps. The green leather looks better than I thought it would with that reverse black and white panda look. The brown leather strap looked nice and conservative. And, for good measure, I threw a saddle brown leather NATO on it as well. A screw-down caseback seals off the watch, which appears to be a polished stainless steel, with the Torbollo logo etched into it. There is also a marking indicating 3 atmosphere water resistance, which means you can wash your hands while wearing it, but that's about it. Now, I never take the back off of a new watch, but curiosity got the best of me, and I just needed to know what was inside of a watch that I got for less than $15. And I was actually a little surprised. To be honest, I was actually expecting a very small, tiny plastic movement, surrounded by a lot of empty space. So finding a movement that fills up the majority of the case was actually a pleasant surprise. The movement is a Sunon PE90, which from my limited research shows that it's a obviously inexpensive movement, but it's okay for the price. So let's move on to the best feature of this watch, the sandwich loom dial, which I believe that only the black version of this watch has, and that sandwich dial looks awesome. For a very brief period of time. This is not a loom that will last you hours into the night. More like minutes. Worse yet is the loom on the hands, which to be honest, I'm not even entirely sure is a loom. It looks like it, but it's barely effective, which can make telling time rather difficult. It really is just a green panda face staring at you in the dark. So, quick dimensions on the watch. It's 39mm without the crown, 43 width. Lug to lug is 46, and it's about 10.5mm thick. Strap width is 20, and the watch weighs about 51 grams. As for how it wears, pretty good. It really is modeled after the Timex Weekender, and it wears about the same. I briefly want to talk about accuracy. I almost never check the accuracy of a quartz watch. After all, it's quartz and I just assume it's all good. But in this case, curiosity again got the better of me. Turns out it's about 2.3 seconds fast, which for quartz is on the bad side of things. Now, plus 2 seconds is definitely usable. Heck, if this was an automatic, that would be great. But we are talking about quartz, and if anything, it's an indication of the quality of the movement that is inside the watch. And for comparison, my Timex Weekender Chrono runs about 0.3 seconds fast today. Now, the big question, of course, is how does this watch compare to the Timex Weekender Chrono, the watch that it's an homage to? And that question I'll actually answer in greater detail in a later video. Mostly because I think every watch deserves its own standalone review before you do a direct comparison. That, and I'd rather not make this video half an hour long. But the short version is this. I'd recommend saving up for the Weekender. But let me elaborate. When I review watches, I like to split the conclusion into 2 parts. The first is looking at a watch for what it actually is, rather than what I might want it to be. In this case, it's a cheap watch that I paid $13 for, which I believe they usually run between $10 and $18. Now, getting a good-looking watch for that price is not a bad deal. But better yet, this is an awesome-looking chronograph for that price. It may have a cheap movement, but everything at that price will. So if you want one, or you're just curious, it's not a lot of money. Just make sure you keep your expectations in check. The second part of how I review things is my own personal recommendation, which, as I already said, would be to save for something else. While this really is a great looking watch, I don't think it's a great watch. That cheap movement is really holding it back. So if you're looking for a great everyday watch, something that you can rely on, this isn't it. But if you're looking for a great beater, and you don't want to join the Casio Royale Club, or if you need a cheap holiday gift, or if you have a family member that inadvertently breaks everything you give them, this is perfect. Heck, this could even make a great starting point for a mod project, as that dial really is awesome. It just needs a better movement. So this is my first experience using Aliexpress, and I wasn't exactly over-enthusiastic about the watch I got. But I do feel like I got what I paid for. Now, I have used the word homage in this video, which I think is actually generous, at least for the other colored versions of the Torbollo. But because of the pancake dial, I think the black one really is special. If anything, I think the Torbollo Chronograph really is a missed opportunity. If they would just put a better movement in it, maybe a little bit better lume on the hands, it really would be something special. It really would be a hidden gem, even if it cost twice as much. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. A great looking, cheap watch. If you have any experience with Aliexpress, good or bad, let me know in the comments. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe.